Here's one for you, Tom. Monitoring and analytics giant Splunk filed a lawsuit last week against alleging intellectual property theft against the CEO of competitor Cribl. The CEO of Cribl is Clint Sharp, and he's a former employee of Splunk. And accordingly to the lawsuit, he grabbed code from Splunk before he left and started his own company. The lawsuit further claims that Cribl lured Splunk employees away and encouraged them to take even more code out of their way on their way out of the door. Sharp responded by saying the goal was always to interoperate with Splunk, but that he and other founders did not steal any code from the company. Tom, lawsuits are a nasty way to settle business. What's going on there?
Well, I think what's happened here is that Splunk has finally reached the point where they realize that they can't settle this any other way. So they're going to file a lawsuit in court. And first, I'm going to disclaim I am not a lawyer. I'm friends with lawyers. I watch lawyers on YouTube, but I am not a lawyer. So getting that out of the way, what's going to happen? Well, we're going to get a whole bunch of ugly discovery, and we're going to open up the code bases of both of these companies because you're going to have to compare it. And we've seen this before in cases like Oracle versus Google. You're basically doing a code walk for people who don't know what code is. And anyone who's ever gone to Stack Overflow knows that there's a lot of code that's available out there, and eventually all the code just kind of looks the same. So let's get down to the actual brass tacks of what happened here. Splunk is a very large company. We know that. They are probably the leader in the monitoring, analytics, security market. Everybody wants to work with them. And Splunk licenses out the ability to interoperate with their code. Fine, great. Well, then Cribl comes along. They're a startup. They're scrappy. They've adjusted to fix some of the issues that Splunk has. They're going after some of that market. The question is, with a company that started by a former employee of Splunk, how much of that code is designed to interoperate with Splunk's original code versus a straight lift? Well, you may be able to say to yourself, oh, that's easy. We'll just run a grep against both code bases and print out a diff. Yeah, if you did that for most code in the world, you'd probably get a lot of hits because there's only so many ways to write a function, write an error return. The only way that you'll actually be able to determine that is if you get a lot of like comments that are the same or references to code pieces that are proprietary. And so it's a dangerous trap. Here's the ultimate problem, and I empathize with the people at Cribl significantly because it is hard to build a tool that works the same as a tool you used to work on, because whether or not you realize it, you are incorporating methods that you are familiar with. And I reference back to the original Berkeley systems distribution clean room implementation of Linux, or not Linux, I'm sorry, of Unix. How did they manage to pull that off without causing any copyright issues? Well, that's easy. They had one person go through the code and describe how it works and write that description down. And then they had a completely different team go in and implement code based on the description that that person wrote. That's a clean room reverse engineering implementation. The people who looked at the original code never have an interaction with the people writing the code for the new code base. That's the only way to say for a fact that when you describe a function that implements a device driver that returns an error code, that they're not unconsciously using methods that they saw in the original code. And that's going to be a very difficult thing to prove in court. Ultimately, I think what's going to happen is that this case is going to settle, because the question of whether or not these companies want to have their code bases opened up for legal review is going to be extremely difficult on both sides of it. Somehow there's going to be a monetary settlement involved. I think where it broke down is that the settlement was originally going to be a very high number that Cribl didn't agree with. And so they're going to litigate this in court. I'm interested to see how this comes out because, like we saw with Oracle versus Google, this is going to be a very huge problem if it makes it to the point where a very learned legal scholar has to make decisions on code when he probably couldn't code his way out of a basic paper bag.